This video is for those that want to make men's hats. Now, most hatters will already know what I'm about to talk about, but due to the growing interest in milliners wanting to make men's hats and also new people coming into the industry of making men's hats, this is just a brief explanation of some of the blocks that we feature for that particular purpose. The most common hat block that's used, the most common crown block that's used in making a man's hat, let's just say a fedora out of felt, is what's known as the 52 block. This is one here. It's actually stamped number 52 on the bottom, and that's its manufacturer's part number, and this became pretty much the industry favourite shape for hand forming the fedoras. And so what we do here is we can make that in any size and any number of runs, and so we've reproduced them anywhere from whatever you want, 54 up to 64, even bigger if you want, and they all scale up and down perfectly in not only width and length and oval, but also in height, so that no matter what size you make, you're going to get the same ratio and style of hat, and that's most important. One of the other favourite blocks of the hat making industry is known as the 51 block. It's got more taper, more of a dome top to it, and so when that's hand formed, this is going to lean out less than it is with the 52, and we make reproductions of that as well. When it comes to the crown blocks, the other thing that a lot of you'll find with the old blocks is they have this hollow in the bottom. That's actually for the pouncing or sanding machine to grip onto. Many hatters these days don't actually have one of those machines, so if you don't want that, we can actually make it with an ordinary base, a couple of finger holes and a larger hole for work putting on a stand while you're blocking. When it comes to your flange brims, the most common flange brim, and there are dozens and dozens of styles of the vintage flanges. I've got three here that we use for reference from time to time, and they're all slightly different in contour, but this particular hat that I'm wearing, for example, would come off of a flange brim a bit like that, got more of a curve to it. One of the other favourite styles for the fedora has a lot less slope to it, less severe, and that coupled with the 51 block, or our reproduction of the 51 block, makes most styles of fedoras that are favoured today. We make these to the same pattern as the vintage blocks. Underneath you will find they have the metal washer that is fixed to the bottom so that this block doesn't get damaged when it gets put on its flange stand. This flange stand is actually a reproduction of a vintage one, quite a common vintage one, and the distance of these two pegs is identical to what the vintage ones have, so the vintage blocks will also fit onto this particular flange if you've got an original one as well. Our reproduction ones will fit on it as well. They feature the same grooves. We actually think that they actually have a better construction than the vintage ones, which, while lovely and are all made out of one piece of wood, as I have experienced, when they get dropped, they will often snap in half, whereas our blocks, because of the construction of them, you could throw them at the wall and jump on them and they're never going to break in half. Vintage blocks also have a hollow on the inside. That's for the, which size is it on? So that this particular ribbon and its bow, if this needed to be reflanged, can fit through here, and the bow sits in that little hollow, and we reproduce that in our blocks as well. We have the hollow in here for the ribbon and the bow, just like the vintage ones. So if you're wanting to start making men's hats for men the hatter's way, you really want to start with a stand, a flange brim and an open crown, and we also provide the tools. We make rounding jacks and pusher downers, puller down tools and so on, and stands. While we're talking making men's hats, the pre-shaped blocks, which most hatters don't have lots and lots of them, like you'll often see racks and racks and racks of these style hat blocks, but less of these. That's because they're hand forming. So why have a block that's already pre-shaped? Well, there's two reasons. One, you might want to make the very same hat over and over and over again as fast as you can, exactly the same shape, not have to worry about whether or not you're getting the shape right by hand and eye. Also, for straws and Panamas, you'll find the pre-shaped is much better because they don't work as well for the steaming and the hand forming. So many hatters making straw hats will favour the pre-shaped crown. Another handy thing to understand about the old blocks is one of the reasons these vintage blocks can actually be in such good condition is that they spent most of their life like this, and that is with a felt covering. So this block is quite ancient, but it's in really good condition because it came with this original felt cover. And what this did, it protected the block from all the steam, and then eventually they worked out that they didn't need this and they could use cling wrap. So most blocks don't have these anymore. But what this illustrates too is that if you've got a crown, say for example it's a 58 and you want it to be a 59 or a 60, if you block over it like this with a felt and then leave that on and block your hat, you've increased the circumference by the thickness of the felt, and a 3mm felt will increase it by approximately 2 centimetres in circumference. So a 58 will become a 60, something like that. So you can always make a bigger block from a smaller one, and because this has no indentations, no hollows, you could do that 2 or 3 times over one of these and still have exactly the same shape. So to save yourself some money, you don't necessarily have to buy 56, 57, 58, 59, 60. You can go half sizes or even 3 sizes and get away with doing this to increase your block selection. The same thing can apply with the brim. For example, you could put a smaller crown through here, but it's going to slop around a bit. Now, within reason, if you were to go round and round and round and round and round the inside of this with some tape, or even a ring of felt, and hold that on with some tape in here, because I don't like the idea of sticking pins in them, you'll make this hole smaller, and you can get away with a little bit of trickiness and expertise and carefully blocking using a smaller crown in a larger flange.